What's going on, guys? This is Gibbs, and we are talking about Fantasy Rocket League. It is starting tomorrow, so make sure you sign up. Rocket-League.com. I guess I'll make a league. It seems like a lot of people want extra leagues, but you can just play against the entire world throughout the entire thing and face off against the defending champ, myself, taking out everyone in the world last time. I got a little bit lucky with some OCE picks, but we're going to go over some tips for Fantasy Rocket League as we enter the season. Sorry about the quality here. I'm actually out in California. I'm on my laptop, so it's my laptop mic, and the quality might not be as good, but I wanted to get a video out for you guys. But we're watching Magnus here. Not sure if I said that yet. He was the #1 fantasy option last season. If you average weeks, a lot of the OCE players wound up getting near the top, but they had an extra week of play because they didn't have any bye weeks. So let's get into some tips real quick. And talking about bye weeks, first tip I have for you guys, avoid the bye weeks, obviously. Look at all the players and make sure the week before they have their bye weeks that you don't have 3 players on the same bye. Because again, you can only make 2 transfers. So I guess 3 is probably the safe, safe option. So then you can trade 2 of them out and have 1 on the bench. But if you have any more than that, then you're going to get in trouble. So make sure you watch out for that, because you don't want any 0-point weeks, because that'll easily take you out of the running. Next up, use your bench for low-level players. You don't necessarily need 7 players. Like, if you plan accordingly, you only need 6 on your team every single week. And that's if you make sure you're trying to keep track of those bye weeks. So if you just put a sub on your team, he's only worth $1,000. Then you have $9,000 to spend on your starting roster. Instead of having like someone really good like J-Naps on your bench in week #1, he's worth a lot of money. It's kind of pointless to have him on your bench. Just pick him up going into week #2. Next up, there's a new thing with positions. There's attackers, midfielders, and defenders. And they get double points for goals for attackers, assists for midfielders, and saves for defenders. So position players correctly. Week 1 might be a little bit interesting or a little bit odd because we're not sure exactly how some of these teams are going to play yet. So pay attention to how teams are playing in certain roles and maybe position correctly going into week #2. On top of that, another tip, focus on defenders after week 1. Saves are plentiful from everyone, but certain players get a lot more saves. And there's a big difference between assist, goals, and saves. So I looked up for North America, 1st place through 19th place. The difference in assists, it's only 0.35 assists per game. That's not much. So I wouldn't worry too much about assists. Usually those are a bit more random, and everyone kind of gets them anyway. But I went to saves. It's a 0.69 difference. That's almost double what assists are. There are definitely people that get a lot more saves than others. Look out for them and try and pick them up for your defenders, because that'll really help you throughout the season with those double points for assists. Now, assists are worth half of what goals are worth normally, but if you have them as defenders, then they're going to be worth the same as goals from a midfielder or same as goals from a defender, so that's really important. Then goals are at a 0.44 difference, so somewhere in the middle. Goals are relatively important, but definitely focus on saves, because you can probably get some cheap players because they'll be on losing teams possibly, but they get a ton of saves that'll really, really help. Next up, focus on score per game in stats. Usually no one really cares about that, but that does matter a lot. There are some teams that just have ball hogs. Try and pick up those ball hogs, like G2 with J-Naps. He hits the ball a lot. He obviously does well in other categories, but score per game, he's always up there, and that's the consistent number that you want to be looking out for. Next up, look for easy matchups. There are certain teams that will play just weak teams in certain weeks. Those are the players you want. Here's some examples. Evil Genius is week 1, CLG, and Out of Style. Now, of course, things might change, and some of these teams might look a little bit stronger or a little bit weaker throughout the season, so pay attention to that. Another example is PSG week 1, they get Excel and Envy. Complexity week 4, they only play Excel. That's a really big one. And then G2 week 5, CLG and Out of Style they play. One other note, with the defenders again, like if you're playing against teams with a lot of shots, like say Justin puts up 4 shots per game again, maybe you want teams when they play against NRG because you can get a ton of saves that way. So that's not a bad option to go with either. So you don't necessarily have to go for the easy matchups. It could also be tough matchups as long as they're shooting on you a lot. One tough matchup I would probably avoid possibly is the Ghost matchup in week #1. They're playing both Cloud9 and NRG, and that one could be a little bit rough as they figure out their roster. Next up, region disparity in picks. Europe actually dominated fantasy last season. My only concern, it's a little bit difficult to predict exactly how Europe's going to go. So maybe a little bit safer picks are NA or the top level of OCE. Because those guys, there's 4 in the top 20. And that was OCE. And that's like the teams or the players you expect to be up there. So that might be a little bit of a safer pick. And then NA, they only had 4 actually in top 20 as well. They're usually more in the middle. Like 21 through 40, there were 7 of them there. So EU is a pretty safe bet. They had 12 of the top 20. We'll see if that trend continues. I'm a little concerned with that just because I worry about some matchups because Europe's going to be so hard to predict. Then you might have some low point weeks, some high point weeks. It's going to vary. So be careful with that. Maybe pick the safer North America players that you think are going to be good, like from the big 3 teams, or the OCE players that you think will do well as well. Because Europe, there's probably 7 teams that could win the whole thing there. So it's going to be really, really difficult to predict there. And then finally, the last tip. I don't even know how many this is. I'll count them later. Just have fun. You don't necessarily have to play to win. Like, personally, I play with just North America and Europe players because I focus on those regions a lot more. Look at that goal from Magnus to end it in overtime. But, like, if you focus on OC, just pick OCE players. It doesn't really matter. Just have fun with it. Make some leagues with friends. Personally, we made a league in the RLCS between 6 of us where we actually drafted the players, so they were all on different teams. Like, you could only have, like, one person could only have JNets. I actually picked them first. But that could be a lot of fun. But there's a limited time. We have probably less than 24 hours by the time you watch this video to actually do that. But just have fun. It's all about having fun. And come take my title, guys. I won last year versus the world. I doubt I'll do it again. I want to see who wins it this time. Let me know what picks you like in fantasy. Personally, here's a couple. Like JNaps, I obviously love. Magnus, I think, might be the best defender. He gets a lot of score per game, but he also gets a ton of saves. So he might be the best defender that you could possibly pick up. And then looking down the line, cheap defenders, Chrome's only 1050. He could be a really good pickup as well. There's obviously tons of other pickups, but that's all I'm going to tell you right now. Thank you for watching, guys, and sorry for the crappy quality. But I wanted to get something out. So we'll see you next time. Come join my fantasy league. Later.